you should take 2 sets of notes. So you're reading Barack Obama right now. So you're taking notes in the book, but then you should also take notes on your notes.
Yep.
And that's the process that I've been doing, is every time I read a book now, I'm writing my notes on what I'm learning as I go along.
That's it.
And then when I'm finished, I go back to those notes and write down, okay, what does that information now mean for me? And how am I going to apply that? Because otherwise, they're just notes in a book. You know, you can put this back on your bookshelf and then you're done with it. Whereas when you actually create notes on your notes, it's creating what's known as depth of processing. When information comes in, for you to really retain that information and create new neural pathways in your brain, you need to remix it or remold it in a certain way. So for me, that might be creating a video or creating a spoken word piece where I talk about the effects of alcohol on your hippocampus. And that's creating that depth of processing. So that's the first thing is...
And I want to add to that tip as well, actually, if you don't mind. Because what I would do is after each lecture, I would go and create questions about the lecture to then not only ask myself, and this is going to actually bring me into a tip I wanted to give, so maybe we'll have to make it 4 tips if you had another 2, but is I would then go and get a group of friends who I felt were inspired by the way in which I work, and I would say to myself, right, they are going to ask me these questions and I have to be able to answer it. Then what I would do is, and this transitions me into the next tip, which is I said to my friends, all right, there's 12 modules we need to revise for this particular exam, because we maybe had 12 lectures. There's 6 of us. You're taking these 2 lectures. You're taking these 2 lectures. You're taking these 2 lectures. And what you need to do is you need to become a master of that content. And you need to create the questions that what you're going to do is, first of all, you're going to create a summary presentation that you take us through. Yeah. So that presentation should last you 10 minutes. You should be able to take us through that whole presentation and educate us, showing us your notes, diagrams, everything, because quite usually lectures are just text and it's just a case of information. I need you to create something that's engaging. If it includes video, if it includes imagery, I need you to create diagrams, flow charts, all of that. That should last you 10, 15 minutes to take us through that content. Then you need to have questions to ask us at the end for us to be able to answer based on what you've just taught us, which you haven't taught us the first time. It's really revision, but still. And so what I do is I utilize the fact that I had a group of 6 friends who we were all going to play football together. You know, we were all going out together when it was like a night out and things like that. So I was like, so we're gonna study together too. Yeah. That's it. If I have to stay at house, stay at house.
If we're willing to go play FIFA together, go out to it, why aren't we willing to study together? And I love that approach because it's crowdsourced learning.
That's how I did it.
You don't have to do everything on your own. You can win together. It's like real collaboration and community. So that second tip there is about delegating your revision and doing it together, because then you have less to focus on, but you can create more from it. The thing that I was going to add from that, and I know that you actually learnt your pitch that way, right? Because you asked the question, is this is a new thing that I've just literally started doing that I've always thought about, is creating a poster where I create a cartoon so I can see that, like, you know, comic book strip of, okay, this is what I need to learn. And then what I actually did was I'd cut each section up and I stuck it in rooms around my house. So when I'm trying to remember, okay, you know, what's next to the lamp? So I would stick, and what you're doing here is, it's called the loci method or loci. You're attaching a memory to a physical object, and it's a very, very powerful way of learning. Because if I say to you, can you tell me where I can find spoons in your house? You know specifically where that is, because it's a place in your head in time and space, right? So what you're doing is attaching a piece of information and using NLP, again, unconscious competence, you're attaching it to a location or a marker. So if I'm trying to learn what's Jeremy Corbyn's policy on the rail network in the UK, I might attach it to my lamp. And then what's Theresa May's policy on, you know, immigration?
It's by the oven or something.
Yeah, it's by the oven. So then I'm thinking, okay, when I'm in the exam, if I need to learn, you know, what's the concept of osmosis mean? Oh yeah, that was next to the lamp and that was all about this. That's a really effective way of revising. So that would be the third tip. Definitely. Is attach your information to physical objects. And then that way, every day when you're walking around, you'll see, oh yeah, when I'm getting a fork to eat dinner, you're reminding yourself again. Yeah. And then the next tip that I'm going to go to from there is spatial repetition. So this is a really fancy way of saying repeat that information. There's a thing called the Ebbinghaus curve, which we'll put a little graph here on the screen that you can see. So when you first learn something, is really fresh in your memory. So after you watch this video, you'll remember it. But the less you access that information, your brain doesn't create that neural pathway. So it doesn't create that groove in your brain. Whereas the more you access it, the longer that information is retained, as you can see on this graph. So what you want to do is continually bring back that information to increase your ability to access that memory. So the other thing that's interesting as well, based on neuroscience, is that the more you access a certain memory, the state that you are in when you access it. So let's say the first time that we met, if I think about that from a negative mood versus a positive mood, it's going to taint that memory. So it's also important the way that you look back at memories and information and putting yourself in a very positive state, which is my final tip when you're accessing that information. So to summarize that really simply is change that information. So I talked about remixing it and depth of processing. And then you spoke about asking questions and also collaborative learning. Then I spoke about attaching information to physical objects. And then that fourth one is making sure that when you access that information, you're doing it on a frequent basis. So don't revise the night before. Everyone knows this, but you can see the science and the kind of information behind it. But also think about the mood that you're in.
Definitely.
Because if you don't enjoy algebra and you're trying to remember, oh, what did Mr. Hill teach me? Oh, I hate that guy. That's the way you're going to feel about that information as well. So be very careful and put yourself in a positive mood by taking positive action. Play your favorite, I know you listen to Focus at Will, play your favorite music, eat your favorite cookie every time you're listening to that. Everyone knows this stuff, but not that many people execute on it. And I think that's the difference.
A bonus tip that almost defeats the object of revision altogether, which is don't revise based on what the word revision should mean. Because to revise means that you're essentially going to repeatedly view something. Do you know what I mean? Which means that you're basically going to have a look at what's already been given to you. My side of the story is go about truly understanding everything that surrounds that, because the way in which, in my opinion, and based on our surveys, and just because we were making some quotes today, tell them a quote about education. It teaches us to regurgitate facts, but not to seek out and correct the cracks. So my thing is, don't just take the information you've been given and then try to remember and regurgitate that. Truly get to understand it and how it works in practice, because that's how I found I was able to connect it to, and therefore I was able to then explain it in more detail, because I truly understood what was going on with that information. So ask yourself, why am I being given this information? Why is that relevant to me? Okay, you told me that Bandura has this theory around psychology for athletes. Okay, so what does that mean? What does that look like in practice? Okay, where have I seen this happening? Who's portrayed that? Interesting. Okay, so then how was that able to be brought about? And then when you start to ask those questions to yourself, then you become more attached to, okay, now I actually see why I need to learn this. Because then it's that thing of, now you've got a why for why you want to understand it. Do you get what I mean? Because you actually start to understand how it works on a macro level and how it works on a day-to-day level.
And what you're building there is an emotional, intrinsic attachment to, why are you learning this?
Yeah.
Where are you trying to get to? And if it's just pointless information to you, then you're not going to engage. It's not going to stick with you. So,
because if someone says eat healthy, and then you're like, okay. And then they're like, yeah, you just need more vitamins and minerals. You're like, okay. But it's not like, if I turn around and say to you, you're going to die. And they're like, what? And you're like, yeah, because you don't have the vitamins and minerals to make your heart continue.
Yeah, the cancer patient who's trying to heal their body through food versus, the 15-year-old me eating Maryland cookies every day.
Literally.
There's a difference, because this person is eating for a reason.
Of course.
This person is just consuming food.
Simple.
I think the best quote on that is, every time you eat, you're either feeding disease or you're fighting it.
Simple.
So you really are what you eat.